Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the What a Deck profile for the 50 card Mythical Beast deck. I'm just going to go through everything in here and then I'll explain how it works. So for monsters, we're playing 3 Mythical Beast Master Cerberus, 3 Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, 3 Astrograph Sorcerer, 3 Mythical Beast King Jackal, 3 Basilisk, 2 Medusa, 3 Garuda, 2 Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, and 3 Mythical Beast Jackal. For spells, we've got 1 Raigeki, 3 Spellbook of Knowledge, 1 Spellbook of Power, 1 Megaton Magical Cannon, 3 Pot of Desires, 1 Dark Hole, 3 Terraforming, 3 Spell Power Grasp, 3 Spellbook of Secrets, 1 Spellbook of Fate, 2 Power of the Guardian, and 3 Magical Citadel of Endymion. Our extra deck consists of 1 each of number 38, Red Eyes Metal Flare Dragon, Mecha Phantom Beast Draco Sack, Big Eye, Utopia the Lightning, Utopia Prime, Utopia, Tornado Dragon, Baguska, Castell, Firewall Dragon, Heavy Metal Foes Electrum, Akashic Magician, Crowley the Origin of Prophecy, and Link Karibo. The side deck I'll go over in a little bit. So, if you are unfamiliar with the Mythical Beasts, they are a pendulum-based archetype that does not actually pendulum summon. Instead, they work on spell counters. When these are monsters, they all gain counters every time a spell is activated, and pendulums count as spells when you activate them in the pendulum zone. So how these work in the pendulum zone is that they all have a similar effect that starts with, if you have no cards in your other pendulum zone, you can destroy this card, and if you do something. So, you get 1 monster out on the field, you activate a pendulum card, it gets a counter, you destroy it in order to do something, and then you can activate another pendulum card, allowing you to both build up counters while gaining effects at the same time. Just real quickly, I'll go through the pendulum effects. Master Cerberus can destroy itself to add 1 level 7 or lower Mythical Beast effect monster from your deck to your hand. So all the Mythical Beasts except for itself. King Jackal can summon 1 Mythical Beast from your extra monster zone, so anything that you've destroyed you can get back with King Jackal. Basilisk lets you shuffle 1 face-up Spellcaster Pendulum from your extra deck into the deck, accept a copy of itself, and draw 1 card, so this recycles and goes through your deck a little bit. Medusa, you can summon 1 card from your graveyard that you can place a spell counter on, which includes all the Mythical Beasts as well as a couple other cards that I don't really play in this deck. Garuda, you can target 1 spell trap on the field and destroy it, and Jackal, you can target 1 card you control that you can put a spell counter on, and put a spell counter on it. Most of these are just kind of generic support. The only real combo with those is the fact that you can use Cerberus, add a King Jackal from your deck to your hand, and then use King Jackal to summon your Cerberus out. He's really your boss monster. His monster effect is each time a spell card is activated, place 2 spell counters on him. If there are 4 more spell counters on the field, this card cannot be destroyed by card effects, and once per turn you can remove 4 spell counters from the field to target 1 monster your opponent controls, banish it, and if you do, this card gains attack equal to the original attack of that banished monster until the end of your opponent's turn. So not only is it a big beat stick, but it has removal that makes it an even bigger beat stick, so a pretty nice choice to get out there. Probably second strongest is King Jackal. Every time a spell counter is activated, again, place 2 spell counters on this card, and once per turn when your opponent's monster activates its effect, quick effect, remove 2 spell counters from the field, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So these 2 are your main 2 monsters. You want to turbo these out as fast as you can, as often as you can, and they both gain 2 counters every time you activate a spell, so the amount of counters you can generate is pretty high. The rest of them only gain 1, and most of their effects are either just to help the engine go faster, or they have sort of like niche uses. Basilisk can remove 3 spell counters from the field to return 1 Mythical Beast from your pendulum zone, or face up from your extra deck to your hand, so you can recycle some of your cards. Medusa, you can remove 2 spell counters during the battle phase as a quick effect to target a monster and its attack and defense become half, which can be pretty decent, but normally you don't want to use your normal summon on this. Garuda actually has a really nice hand trap effect. When your opponent normal or special summons a monster, you can remove 3 spell counters from the field, special summon this from your hand, and return that monster your opponent controls to their hand. So this can stop combos in progress. Oftentimes, aside from getting these 2 out on the field, your main goal is to get 3 counters on the field and get this into your hand. And fortunately, you can summon this with Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. I didn't mention this before. He works with the deck because during the end phase, you can destroy this card, and if you do, add a Pendulum monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. So not only will he clear himself out of the pendulum zone so that you can activate all the rest of your effects, but he searches Medusa, your Garuda, and also the Jackal. This one, you can remove 3 spell counters from the field, tribute this card, and special summon 1 Mythical Beast from your deck, except a copy of itself. This is another really strong playmaker just for getting your things started. Normally you want to go for King Jackal just because it can't summon itself out of the extra deck with its effect. You have to summon another one. So the optimal opening hand is, say, a Jackal, a Cerberus, and then any other 2 spell cards, which, considering we're playing all spell cards except for this guy, not all that difficult. Speaking of this guy, I'll mention the only non-pendulum in the deck, Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, just a draw engine. You really need to activate as many spell cards as you can, and the best way to do that is to activate ones that search for you. That's actually why the 50 cards ends up working out. This Magician of Prophecy, if you don't know, normal summoned, add a spellbook from your deck to your hand. You can search it with Spellbook of Secrets, or if you already have it, you can use it to grab Spellbook of Secrets. This will add any spellbook except itself, and you can use that to add Spellbook of Knowledge, which is send to the graveyard either a spellcaster monster you control, or a spellbook in your hand to draw 2 cards. So, normal summon, get Secrets, Secrets searches this draws you 2 cards, so you end up plussing off of it, in addition to getting several counters onto your monsters, or onto your field spell. This is actually probably a key component of the deck. Every time a spell card's activated, place 1 spell counter on this. If a card with spell counters is destroyed, place the spell counters on this card. And once per turn, if you would activate a card effect by removing spell counters from your side of the field, you can remove them from this instead. That second effect's not as important because all of these can remove from the field anyway, but it's just nice to have in general. Having this just generating more and more spell counters so that you can use all your effects without having to worry about running out of them. Our only other monster, then, is Astrograph Sorcerer. We're mainly using it for its monster effect. If cards you control are destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this from your hand. Choose 1 monster in your graveyard, extra deck, or that's banished, and add 1 monster from your deck to your hand with the same name. Since all your Mythical Beasts get their effects by destroying themselves in the Pendulum Zone, this can be a great way to not only get a monster on the field with 2500 attack, but also search out another monster so that you can go through your deck even faster. The rest of the deck is just sort of like powerful or influential spells. We've got Raigeki and Dark Hold just for destruction because our removal options are a little limited. We're playing 1 Spellbook of Power since you can search it with Secrets. This will not only give any of your spellcaster monsters 1000 attack until the end phase. Also, if it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can add a Spellbook card from your deck to your hand. Also, since we're running all the spellbooks, we run the 1 Spellbook of Fate, which is mostly good because you can banish 3 spellbooks from your graveyard to banish 1 card your opponent controls. Just another little bit of removal that adds more spell counters and that you can search with all your things. Megaton Magical Cannon, remove 10 spell counters from your side of the field, destroy all cards on your opponent's side of the field. It's not really all that great. It can be really bricky at times, especially if you get it in your opening hand, but it's fun for the lulz. If you're trying to play this more seriously, though, I'd probably get rid of this. Finally, we just have Spell Power Grasp. Target 1 face-up card on the field, place a spell counter on it, and then add another copy of itself. Just, again, more spell counters, plus deck thinning. And then Power of the Guardians. This is another card, kind of like Magical Megaton Cannon. Not necessarily useful. Probably want to switch this out if you're making a more serious version of the deck. But it worked enough for me that I had to sort of keep it in. It's an equip card. When an attack is declared involving the equipped monster, place a spell counter on this card. The equipped monster gains 500 attack and defense for every counter on this card. And if the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effects, you can remove a spell counter from your field instead. So not only is this protection for a thing like Jackal that doesn't have any inherent protection, it's also a way to boost attack. If you can keep something on the field for a few turns, that 500 can quickly become 2,000. Plus, it's just a spell card, it's new, it works with everything else. So I figured I'd try it out. There's been a couple times where I've gotten down to a grind fest and all I had was a Basilisk in this and managed to pull out a victory, so I thought I'd include it in there. And that's pretty much the entire deck. The extra deck is just sort of a hodgepodge, whatever you can fit in there. I've got a rank 8, a couple rank 7s, a couple rank 4s, just because those are the levels we have. I'm playing some links, including the new spellbook link, just because it's 2 spellcasters and it uses spellbooks, and we're all about that. The 1 link Karibo for your level 1 monster. Really, you could put anything in there. It doesn't go into the extra deck too often, although you have just enough 4s that having at least a rank 4 toolbox is probably advisable. And finally, that just brings us to the side deck. And the side deck is full of just other options, things you can do with this deck. I actually went through 6 different builds of this deck before I settled on the 50 card variant. And this is not actually even all that powerful. I couldn't make the deck work as well as I wanted to. So I wanted to sort of present this as a base. This is the general gist of what you can do, what I think are some of the better cards. And then here's some more options. Maybe you can get it to work better than I did. We've got Endymion, the Master Magician himself, 2700 attack. You can special summon this card from your hand or graveyard by removing 6 spell counters from the magical Citadel that we've got. If you summon this way, you can target a spell card in your graveyard, add it to your hand, and once per turn you can discard a spell card to target 1 card on the field and destroy it. This can actually be pretty decent in like a 40 card variant of this deck, especially if you were focused more on the field spell. Unfortunately, I couldn't really get it to work. It ended up bricking a lot more than I wanted to, but it's worth considering just because it can recycle something like Raigeki or even Pot of Desires and get you some more advantage back. Likewise, with the 40 card variant, you'll probably want to run 1 for 1 because this is so good for getting anything out of your deck. With the 50 card variant, there's too many spells. You've got to discard a monster for this, and oftentimes I wouldn't have the ability to discard things. I'd only have 1 monster I didn't want to discard, so I wouldn't run that. Likewise, Magical Boost. This is the quick play spell card that goes with the Mythical Beast. You could send the top 2 cards from your deck to the graveyard to target 1 card on the field and place up to 2 spell counters on it. Pretty decent because it alone can get your Jackal up to the 3 counters it needs to summon anything. Again, if you're going for a thinner 40 card variant, this can be good, but oftentimes I'd get it when I needed a monster or I needed like a Raigeki or something like that. It also has the effect that if it's destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you could special summon a monster from your deck that you can place a spell counter on and put 2 spell counters on it. So if nothing else, it's a neat bluff card if your opponent's playing a lot of spell trap hate. Other stuff I tried that didn't really work, Royal Magical Library. Every time a spell is activated, place a spell counter on it. You can remove 3 from this card to draw a card. Of course, you can use Edmonton's effect if you get 3 on that, and once per turn, remove it from that instead. So it has some synergy, but you really have to get it first turn, and if you can't get a huge wall up, having that 0 attack point monster on the field can mean death for you. Ignite Reload, again in a smaller deck. This lets you reveal any number of pendulum monsters, shuffle them into the deck, and then draw cards equal to the number +1. So it replaces itself while fixing your hand and giving you spell counters, but if you don't have all pendulum monsters, it doesn't work as well. Extra Buck, every time a card's added to your extra deck, put a spell counter on this. When it gets 3, you can send it to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. It's a little too slow as a trap, and it would have been the only trap in the deck. Another Medusa, just because really you don't get stuff in the graveyard, but you could play like Lightning Vortex and Twin Twisters in this if you wanted more monster or spell trap destruction, and also get stuff in the graveyard so that Medusa's effect to summon out of the graveyard is actually useful. Also, in going with 60 card variants, Upstart Goblin was pretty nice, just because you go through your deck, you add another spell counter. Rescue Hamster, I'm not going to read all its effects, but you can do a lot of shenanigans with either normal summoning it or activating it in the spell trap zone, because it does destroy itself. Pendulum Paradox, add 2 face-up pendulum monsters with the same scales but different names from your extra deck to your hand. Great recovery card in this, because everything except for Astrograph Sorcerer has a scale of 4, so as long as you get any 2 cards in the extra deck, you can add them back. The problem is I kept opening up with this when I didn't have cards, so I decided not to play it, but it is pretty good in the deck. This card isn't out yet, but would probably be really good if you have 3 pendulum monsters face up in your extra deck with different names. You can draw 2 cards, though for the rest of the turn you can't draw cards, so not necessarily good with all the draw power we have, but might work in a 40 card variant yet again. And then finally, Wavering Eyes and Rebel King Leonidas. These are the 2 I would actually consider side decking. Wavering Eyes is amazing against any sort of pendulum deck. It doesn't really work all that great for you, because a lot of your monsters, you don't want them to be destroyed by effect other than their own effect. But if you're playing against pendulums, you can add counters while disrupting them and searching. So always useful. And then Leonidas is pretty good just for the Trickstar matchup, because he'll stop you from getting burn damage. Not something you'd want to main deck, but again, if you happen to go up against Trickstars, then it's something that you could definitely side in and it has some synergy with the deck. So there you go, kind of an interesting little experiment, looking at some of the newer decks that are coming out. If you want to see how this works in action, there's a link to a separate video in the description where I'll be playing 10 duels against random opponents on YGOPro. You can actually see all the combos and everything. Otherwise, until next time, good luck and have fun.